It's always a miracle when it works.
Mm.
Okay, am I on?
Yes, you are.
Actually, I say, are we on? So I'm sitting here with my lovely wife, Maggie.
Hello.
Yeah, we're both two of the founders of the Blue Ridge Prism. So thank you for the invitation. We're delighted to be here. We've got a variety of things to talk about here this evening. We hope all of you are enjoying the great weather and finding time to spend outdoors. Even though a lot of us tend to be sequestered, guess what? Yeah, the invasive plants are not sequestered at all. In fact, they're out there having a fine old time. But yeah, so with the slides I have here tonight, I'm going to go through quickly kind of what is the problem. Yeah, then we'll give a little introduction to the Blue Ridge Prism, a little history of the Blue Ridge Prism. Yes, what does it take to start another prism, if any of you are interested, and then talk about some New River area specific topics, and then open it up for questions. Having said that, if somebody has a question that they want to ask along the way, don't hesitate to just interrupt and ask questions. We don't have any problem with that. So the first thing was kind of what's the problem? So this is the invasive plant problem, if you will. I sometimes describe it as a slow motion tsunami, that's going on all around us. Most people don't even know what's going on with this, but what's happening is our native plants are being replaced by overseas invaders. Now, not all non-native plants are a problem. I mean, most of these plants were brought here with good motives, but people didn't really understand the risks of bringing in overseas plants. But most of these overseas plants are not invasive, but there's a few that cause a lot of really serious problems. Because what happens here is these plants, there's no bugs that eat them, there's no fungi to infect them, and no animals graze on them or caterpillars to eat them. There's basically nothing here that keeps them in check. Some of them also, leaf out early. They stay green late. They can adapt to many different kinds of soils. They're prolific seeders. So they have other advantages compared to some of the native plants. So, but on the other hand, why is this a problem? Well, it's a problem ultimately because nothing stops them. They create monocultures that just overwhelm all the native plants. They spread fast. They can literally take acres and acres and make them impenetrable and unusable. The people who are trying to control these plants are finding that their costs are soaring. And if that all weren't bad enough, what happens also is that when you look at the local ecology and the food web, a lot of these non-native plants are effectively sterile. And what that means is they don't support our native insects, our birds, our mammals, etc., which means that when you get a lot of these non-native invasive plants in one place, you find that you've got fewer and fewer insects, birds, and mammals. So there's a real wildlife impact that's also slowly rising and becoming more serious. So I'm going to just flip through a bunch of pictures here real quickly. Some of these you may recognize. So here's Oriental Bittersweet. You can see the vines going up over the trees. There's basically no tree big enough to withstand an onslaught of Oriental Bittersweet. It's capable of bringing down pretty much any tree out there. Kudzu, pretty much same thing. We like to joke about this one and say we think the kids got out of the bus in time, but you don't necessarily notice that there's a building back here, underneath the kudzu behind the bus too. But in any case, we also have out there bamboo. You see this more and more up along the roadsides. If you've got a fence row, you've probably got Japanese honeysuckle growing on it. In cities in particular, I know downtown Charlottesville is certainly this way. People have planted ivy and it's escaped. And actually it's starting to show up in some rural areas as well. So it's becoming a problem. Five-leaf akebia is another vine, just like the others, that will go up and overtop the trees and bring down a canopy. So porcelainberry, also not quite so common, but we have it here too. Perfectly capable, like the others, of going up and overtopping major trees. So those of you familiar with Tree of Heaven or Lanthus, so this is one of the members of the leadership team at the Prism, William Hammerski. He cut down a medium-sized Lanthus and gathered up all the seeds and actually took it upon himself to count them. He didn't literally count them one at a time. He weighed them. But there's 43,000 seeds in this bin from that relatively modest tree that he took down. So if you look at this picture, you can see this field is being filled in with seedlings. And these seedlings are all autumn olive. And this field was actually cut 7 months earlier. And what happens here is, unless somebody does something about this, what these autumn olives will do is they will grow up and they'll be anywhere from 6 to 12 feet tall. And there will be nothing in this field but autumn olive. And it'll be absolutely and totally impenetrable unless you take some serious equipment and make a road through the middle of it somehow. But it just creates this massive thicket. So here's Bradford pear. Maggie and I have planted Bradford pears in our earlier years before we realized what a problem it was. It's a very attractive tree. It was kind of, millions of them were sold all over the United States with the best of intentions. And it was sold as a self-sterile tree, which it is. The problem was that was fine as long as it was the only cultivar of the Callery pear that was being sold in the US. Once people discovered that the Bradford pear, while it's very pretty, was also very, very brittle, they decided they needed to sell a different version of the Callery pear to make up for the faults of the Bradford pear. And then all of a sudden, the Bradford pear wasn't sterile anymore. It could now breed with this new cultivars, the new cultivars they put out. So those millions of Bradford pears that were sold around the country all of a sudden started multiplying. And so this is a field, of course, obviously filled in with Bradford pear. On the forest floor, many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with garlic mustard. It can create a monoculture, as the understory in a forest. We've certainly seen this in places where we've lived. And then, of course, Japanese stiltgrass. Everybody's biggest nemesis in this part of the world. It just fills in the understories as well as along the roadsides, and it can grow to several feet tall and just create a monoculture that pretty much blocks out everything else. So so those are just examples of the stuff out there. Here's a picture of the invasive plant problem across the entire U.S. So this is a U.S. Forest Service produced map, if you will, and they analyze different little subplots every 5 or 7 years around forested subplots around the country, and one of the things they measure is how many of them are invaded with invasive plants, and as you can see, the red are the most highly invaded ones, if you will. And the red is concentrated in the eastern United States and right up and down the Appalachian Mountains, where we all are is pretty heavily redded out here, if you will. So we are kind of ground zero for this problem in a lot of ways in the U.S. So what does this represent? This represents challenges at all levels. We've got invasive trees replacing native trees. We've got vines that tear down the canopy. And basically when the vines are done, what you're left with are green mounds, which is not good for anything. We've got shrubs that fill in the fields, but there's also shrubs like autumn olive and privet that'll fill in the forest understory as well. And then you got the grasses and forbs filling in the ground layer that smother the natives, and they even slow or prevent the regeneration of trees. I mean, new tree seedlings have a lot of trouble coming up through a mass of something like stiltgrass. and not to be lost in this conversation, but we don't talk about it quite as much, are the aquatics. Just as there are terrestrial invasive plants, there are aquatic invasive plants that fill in ponds and streams and impact the fish and the aquatic wildlife, and actually even create danger for boaters and make certain areas off limits, for boating. So where does all this lead? Well, if we do nothing more than we do today, it seems inevitable that these plants are going to continue to overwhelm and eliminate the forests and meadows as we know them. Likewise, wildlife will certainly also continue to decline slowly but surely. And after a few generations, whether it's our children or our grandchildren or their children, this planet and the forest that we know, they're not going to look the same way for a few generations out. So this is part of why we're doing what we're doing, is to see if we can find a way to head off this problem. So what is the Blue Ridge Prism actually doing? So we have two primary core activities. One is where we focus on 10 counties along the Blue Ridge, up here in the northern Blue Ridge. We're focused on helping the landowners understand what they've got and help them understand what it takes to remove and replace the invasive plants. And so this is the original mission of Blue Ridge Prism and what we've been doing for the last 6 years. But in the last year or two, we've also decided to get more involved in certain actions to try and solve the invasive problem on a broader basis, ideally across the entire state. And I'll talk about both of these things briefly here. So in terms of who's involved in the Blue Ridge Prism, so here's a list. So on the left-hand side, the Shenandoah National Park Trust has been kind of our mentor in our 501c3. So originally we were not set up as a 501c3. We operated under the umbrella of the Shenandoah National Park Trust. The rest of the organizations on the left-hand list here were the signatories to our general agreement and therefore members of our steering committee to provide, if you will, the board level governance of the PRISM. As you can see, the Virginia Native Plant Society has been involved from day one. We speak with and are involved with Nancy Veers as well as the local VNPS chapter, Thomas Jefferson chapter here in our area. On the right-hand side, you can see another long list of organizations who we work with in some capacity or another for various different purposes. In effect, they are also partners of ours. And then there's a note down here on the bottom, which is literally as we speak, we're in the process of becoming our own 501c3 standalone entity to be the Blue Ridge Prism, Inc. And I'll talk about that more in a little bit. So the coverage of the PRISM, I mentioned we cover 10 counties. So here it is with Nelson and Augusta on the south, going up along the Blue Ridge to Clark County at the north. It does include the entire Shenandoah National Park. It's 10 counties, almost 3 million acres. We estimate there's roughly 50,000 landowners in this area who own 5 acres or more. And of course, the mission, the mission that we've adopted for the Blue Ridge Prism is to reduce the impact of invasive species in this targeted geography. But as I mentioned, as you'll see, we're spreading our wings and going a little bit wider and broader for some topics. So what do we do for the landowners in our area? We do quarterly meetings with speakers. Our next quarterly meeting is actually next Wednesday, I believe it is, the 21st, where we've got a guest speaker, Mark Sutphin from the Virginia Cooperative Extension, coming in to talk about the spotted lanternfly. And if you're not familiar with the spotted lanternfly, it's only a matter of time before you will be. It's the newest bug that's come into Virginia from Pennsylvania. It's up in Frederick County, Winchester. They've VDACS, the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, has actually put a quarantine on businesses, moving things in and out of that county for fear of spreading the spotted lanternfly. The lanternfly does have its favorite plants that it feeds on are, interestingly enough, Ailanthus, tree of heaven, because they came from the same place. But it also loves grapevines and orchards. So it's a big threat to the whole vineyard winery industry, as well as the orchard industry. So it's an agricultural threat that's getting a lot of attention, and it's spreading, it's spreading steadily. So it's one of the things we'll be working on. But again, quarterly meeting next week. Mark Sutphin will come, and he's with the Cooperative Extension up in Winchester. So he's at ground zero and is kind of the state expert on the subject, if you will. So it should be really interesting. We also have Caitlin Mooneyhan from the Virginia Department of Forestry giving a general forest health update. And the Prism's Jim Hurley is going to give an update on some of our wavy leaf projects. We have a variety of wavy leaf projects that are funded by outside grants. And we'll talk about wavy leaf just a little
Hello.
bit. Go ahead.
Hello.
How are you?
Somebody there?
Okay, I'm back home.
Yeah, no problem. Other things on this list. Normally we would do a lot of tabling events, but obviously most of the events where we would be tabling have been canceled.
Keep the stones out, but the immediate problem has been fixed.
We also do a lot of speaking engagements like this one. So if you have other groups that you'd like to have us speak to, that's an option. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. We also give workshops. These used to be in person. Now they're primarily via Zoom. We give 9 of them a year, 3 each in spring, fall, summer, and fall. We've got 1 more coming up this fall. So if you want to attend, you can look at our website, blueridgeprism.org, and see the dates to sign up and attend. What these are workshops that go through in detail how to identify about 20 different invasive plants, and then talk about all the different control methods that are available and how to use those control methods to control these various plants. And these are both manual control methods. These are things that include herbicides or combinations of them, or mechanical things. So that's all covered in these workshops. We also publish quarterly newsletters. We have a variety of fact sheets and other things, plant by plant, out on our website that are available for anybody to download. And we've been working over the years to provide landowner financing for landowners to help pay for the removal of invasive plants. To this point, we've generated roughly $1 million worth of grants and awards that has gone out to landowners, or is in the process of going out to landowners to pay for invasive plant removal. So that landowner financing included an award from the NRCS in 2016 that generated $640,000 of funding that's gone out to 94 landowners to treat 2,000 acres, and they each get funding to do that for 3 years. We've got a $250,000 grant as part of a settlement with the DuPont company over in Waynesboro as part of a pollution remediation settlement. So that gave us 5 years of treatment for 6 wavy leaf sites. And now we have a new grant that started this year with the U.S. Forest Service through the Virginia Department of Forestry to do additional wavy leaf treatment work at several sites. Excuse me, my throat's drying up. At this point, we have about 1,800 people on our mailing list. That's up from about 1,300 at the beginning of the year. On a statewide basis, well, a lot of things have slowed down, on a statewide basis. The legislative session at the beginning of the year, slowed things down, and then of course the pandemic showed up. But we've been involved in conversations with the 2 secretariats. Matt Strickler's, he's the Secretary of Natural Resources, Bettina Ring, who's the Secretary for Agriculture and Forestry, And we've been dealing with a variety of the major natural resources agencies on various different programs. For example, one of the ones that we're particularly keen on is working with VDOT. VDOT manages 55,000 miles of roadsides around the state. And we've been working with them and trying to convince them to stop planting non-native plants, not to mention non-native invasive plants, along the roadsides when they do construction projects. And they've actually decided they're very interested in this topic and trying to figure out how to change their programs and their planting list to favor native plants. And we've worked with them, and they're now they're going to be kicking off a study in January. It's scheduled for January with Virginia Tech doing the work. And they're going to sample several hundred roadside sites to identify what kinds of plants are growing there, both native and non-native, and then come back and use that information to make recommendations to VDOT on planting lists for different kinds of microenvironments that are encountered along the roadsides throughout the state. Another thing that we've been very involved in is nominations and additions to the Virginia noxious weeds list. It's a lengthy, time-consuming process, but nonetheless, we did get 6 plants added to the official noxious weeds list just this last July, and we're working on the next round of nominations. We've got a meeting coming up in another week or two to see how many of the nominations can be moved forward. So and there's lots of room here for other people to get involved and help us get other nominations on the table. Once a plant is put on the noxious weeds list, then it can no longer be sold inside the state. It can't be imported into the state. It can't be grown for commercial purposes in state nurseries. And it actually even can't be transported around the state without a permit. So there's a lot of work to be done to get a lot more plants on here. There's now only about a dozen plants on the list, and there should be a few dozen more we can get added. So we're working on that. Another thing on here is we helped UVA get a grant to undertake a project to look at, can we use a drone to fly over a large piece of property, and using some very sophisticated camera and imaging equipment, take images of what's down below, and then produce a map by species. So literally, hey, if you got, can we take a 500-acre piece of property, fly this drone over it, and come back and give the land manager a map of where to find all the autumn olive, or where to find all the bittersweet, or where to find all the ailanthus. So we're trying to prove that you can use a drone to do that. We're making good progress. The project has got some preliminary results, specifically working with autumn olive. That looks very promising. So other things we're willing to do, of course, on a statewide basis, is that if anybody wants to form another Prism, and we'll talk a little bit more about this some more tonight, we're obviously keenly interested in having other Prisms operating in the state, because we are making a lot of noise and making a lot of progress in Richmond and in our territory. But if there were 10 Prisms in the state, we could get a whole lot more done and have a whole lot more impact in Richmond. So it's a big deal, and we're happy to help anybody else who wants to really get serious about creating another Prism. Just to illustrate, here's some of these are the plants that we tend to talk about probably the most. A list of vines, a list of grasses and forbs. And then on the next slide, we've got a few trees and a variety of shrubs. So if you attend one of our workshops, not all, but most of the plants on these lists would be talked about in terms of how do you identify them, and then also how do you control them. Some of the less familiar aggressive species that we find ourselves talking about are things like mile-a-minute vine, lesser celandine. Lespedeza cuneata is really showing up big time along the roadsides around the state. That's one of the ones that VDOT, unfortunately, has been planting all over the state. We think they've now agreed with us that they shouldn't be doing that anymore. So hopefully that won't happen anymore. but you know, there's lots of interesting plants out there. So some of the kinds of questions we typically get from landowners are, you know, things like, how do you deal with a specific plant, you know, with bamboo or knotweed? You know, what herbicides do you use and how do you avoid using them? What about biocontrols that have been released? These are funguses or insects that attack the plants. If you've got a lot to do, how do you prioritize the work? A lot of people ask, geez, can you really make a difference? Or is this a hopeless battle? And we can talk about that. You know, what natives should I plant when I remove invasives? It's a very tricky question, as we'll talk about a little more. Where to get help, where to learn more, etc. So those are some of the common questions we get from landowners. So having said that, now let me just give a little history of the Blue Ridge Prism. So we were started in 2014. Yeah, Maggie and I were in the forefront of making this happen. This is a volunteer landowner-driven organization. Okay. Now, for context, the Blue Ridge Prism is what's known generically as a cooperative weed management area. And there are actually several hundred cooperative weed management areas in the United States. Yeah, we were the first one formed in Virginia, and there really aren't. There's another one that was started up in Northern Virginia, the Nova Prism. It's been struggling for a variety of reasons. And then there's another one, which is the National Capital Region Prism, which covers Washington, D.C., a little bit of Virginia, a little bit of Maryland. There's some other cooperative weed management areas along our border with West Virginia. So there's rivers and gorges, actually down near where you are. And the Potomac Highlands is actually adjacent to us up here. So when we formed the Prism, we literally had a legal agreement that we called the General Agreement that was signed by the members of the steering committee. And the steering committee was meeting once or twice a year as kind of the high-level coordinating governance board. But on the day-to-day basis, we've got a leadership team made up of volunteers and employees that really manage the day-to-day operations of the Prism. As I mentioned earlier, we were not our own 501c3, and that was provided by the Shenandoah National Park Trust. So we operated under their umbrella as a project of the trust. And for the first 2 years, we pretty much had no money and no employees, but nonetheless, we got a lot done. We had a big break in 2016 when we made a proposal to the NRCS and got an $894,000 award back from them. It was tricky because, first of all, by their rules, we had to match it 1-for-1. And oh, by the way, none of it could be used for the internal operations of the Prism. So that presented some interesting challenges for us. But we worked our way through it, and we made a lot of good things happen from that. So going on from there, the next thing that happened is we did secure, partly because we got the other big grant, we secured a $15,000 matching grant from a family foundation. And so this was for our internal purposes. So, and matching grant means we got their $15,000 if we could raise another $15,000 to match it, which we have succeeded in doing. And we've been getting a grant from this foundation now. I think we're about to get the fourth one, which good news is I found out this afternoon that yes, they approved the 2021 grant for us. And it's now up to $20,000 per year, which means we have to match it with another $20,000. So that's out there. So we're about to launch our end of the year fundraising campaign to raise the money to match this foundation's $20,000 grant. Normally each year now for the last 2 or 3 years, we also receive another grant from the Virginia Environmental Endowment, also for $20,000, and also which we have to match 1-for-1 separately from the other one, which means we wind up with an operating budget of about $80,000 a year, which most of that goes to pay for employees, if you will. And we've discovered that, no surprise, being a standalone 501c3, is more expensive than operating underneath the umbrella of the Shenandoah National Park Trust. So we're now sitting here supporting one full-time employee and one 15-hour-a-week part-timer, and we're gonna have to operate on roughly $100,000 a year budget, which will all come from matching grants and private donations. So from a fundraising standpoint, we clearly have our work cut out for us, but we've got enough history and practice that I don't expect it won't be easy, but we'll get it done. So what's the new operating model? It's a 501c3. So our mission and activities basically don't change at all. Our leadership team, which consists of about 13 volunteers and 2 employees, of whom 4 or 5 do most of the work, leadership team doesn't change, and what they do doesn't change. But now instead of having a steering committee, we're going to have a board of directors. So we're in the process of forming that. We're going to have 3 officers, a president, a treasurer, and a secretary. Initially, I'm the president and the secretary, and Jim Hurley is our treasurer. The organizations that were on our steering committee have now been transmogrified or morphed into an advisory council. So we'll still be interacting with them and getting their advice and counsel on how to do what we're doing. As I mentioned, we do have two employees, one full-time, one part-time. But the bottom line is it's still a volunteer, landowner-driven organization, and we're out there, trying to fight the good fight with the plants. So if you have an interest in starting another Prism, so here's a few slides to talk about that, which is there's actually a cookbook for how to do this, sitting out at MIPN.org. MIPN stands for the Midwest Invasive Plant Network, and they are a great resource for all kinds of materials, and it's a great place to start. You can download a copy of their cookbook. So what do you need to be successful in terms of doing this? Number one, first and foremost, is leadership. You need a core team of people who've got the passion, the drive, the vision, the time, endurance, and who can work together as team players and who are going to drive the organization going forward. So you need whether it's 2, 4, 8, you need a core team of people who are going to be willing to spend the time and make it happen. Then you need to define a clear, simple mission that's backed up with an implementation strategy and a defined geography, and make sure you know what it is you're going to try to accomplish and how you're going to do it. Partnerships and sponsorship. I will tell you that when we started up the Blue Ridge Prism, we went out and talked to lots of different organizations, including all the ones you saw listed on who's involved, and it was really heartening because we would sit down and talk to each and every one of these organizations, and no one said no. And everybody was very encouraging and helpful, and everybody wanted to see us succeed. So there's no problem getting people to say, yes, we will help you. Getting people to say they're going to give you money, however, is not quite the same thing. Pretty much nobody on our steering committee has been actually able to provide us with funding. So we've had to go out and obtain all of that independently. On the other hand, what do you need funding for? Well, if you're going to have employees, eventually, you have to raise enough money to support employees. You will have to do a certain amount of publishing. You want to have a brochure. We produce some really nice fact sheets that you can download off our website. Well, you want to set up a website. Okay, well, there's work to be done, and there are some costs associated with doing that. As long as you don't have an employee, the costs are not large. During that phase of our development, if you will, those of us who are volunteers, and it's largely still true today, we just eat our own costs. I mean, if we drive someplace, we don't ask to be reimbursed. If we buy something, we generally don't ask to be reimbursed. But there are exceptions if it's a large expenditure. So so funding is clearly one of the keys ultimately. The first grant we ever got, we actually got from Columbia Gas. because their local offices have the ability to make small grants up to $2,000. And we convinced one of the local offices here to give us a $2,000 grant to pay for putting up a website. So yeah, there are ways to do it. There are places to go. So what else we got here? So yeah, these are the big challenges: leadership, money, enough volunteers to do what has to be done, and then deciding, do you have a fiscal sponsor out there like we did, operating underneath the Shenandoah National Park Trust, or do you want to bite the bullet and become a 501c3 to start with? Having literally just going through that process now, it's a fair amount of work to set yourself up as a 501c3, but it is doable, and people do it. Some other important questions. Okay, so landowner-driven model versus a model focused on the lands of the steering committee. So what does this mean? This is interesting because if you look at the other cooperative weed management areas in the United States, the Blue Ridge Prism is really very unusual. Most of the other cooperative weed management areas in the United States were formed by a group of organizations who got together to share best practices to do work on their lands. Whereas the Blue Ridge Prism is not focused on doing work on the lands of the people who formed the Prism. Yeah, our focus is on all the landowners in our targeted geography, and trying to get everybody in our targeted geography to do the work. So that means our focus is on education and enlisting these tens of thousands of landowners to do the work, instead of focused on treating just a few land ownerships. We are, as I mentioned, we're education focused as opposed to fielding work teams. If you talk to the Potomac Highlands over in West Virginia, they actually fund some fielding of actual work teams to go out and do work. But again, it's on the lands that the leaders of their organization manage. In this case, mostly national forests. So, and again, other things in terms of how you organize. Do you have a steering committee, a board of directors, advisory council, partners, leadership teams? Yeah, how do you do all these things? We're happy to talk to you about any of that in a lot more detail. Available support out there. There's lots of materials out there you can leverage, both from us and from elsewhere. We'll share anything we've got. Once you get a group of partners together, you can get various things from them as well. But you are largely on your own. Even though there's several hundred cooperative weed management areas in the United States, they are pretty much, everyone is an independent standalone entity. There's no umbrella that manages or helps to manage all these cooperative weed management areas. Pretty much each one is an independent entity, making its own way through the world. And on the other hand, from our standpoint, we really do hope to eventually have a group of prisms in Virginia that can help each other. This would make a huge difference. And not to mention the other ones that are nearby in the neighboring states. There's a lot we can do to help each other. So then I have a couple of topics in here specific to the New River area. So I don't know if anybody here is familiar with it, but from our standpoint, there's a volunteer opportunity in the New River State Park because there's a roughly 20-acre wavy leaf infestation there, and it's the only wavy leaf infestation we know of, south of our territory, I believe. And if you are familiar with Japanese stiltgrass and hate stiltgrass, you're going to hate wavy leaf. So it's important to try and get on top of wavy leaf and stop it before it gets away from us all. So if you have the inclination, anybody, I can put you in touch with people who can tell you more about what's going on there. And actually, we in the Blue Ridge Prism, we don't know if this infestation is actually being worked or not. We have no idea. It's kind of late in the season to be working on wavy leaf, but it can be done if you do it really carefully. And I don't know if the location of it's in Maiden or EDD maps. It might be. Happy to talk about that some more. And then a question I was asked was, okay, well, 9-acre Wong Park, there's 9-acre water retention area being overtaken by invasive plants. If you take things out, what are the native plant alternatives? And we've had a couple of our quarterly meetings done on the subject of restoration, if you will. What do you do after you take out native plants? There are various books out there that talk about plant this, not that. There are various resources that I can put you in touch with. There's no simple answer that says, hey, every place you take out autumn olive, put in this plant, or every place you take out stiltgrass, put in that plant. There are guidelines for alternatives that various people have suggested, but ultimately it depends upon the specific area and what's the characteristics of that area, as well as what are the native plants that are growing around it or in similar micro ecosystems in the same area. So I mentioned we had some sessions on restoration. I tried to summarize on one slide some of the key things that came out of those sessions about how to do restoration. So minimize disturbance, just so you don't create more venues, if you will, for invasive plant seed to take root. The second item on here is not really just a joke. Eat the deer, because one of the things that the studies have shown is that deer actually do make a difference, because guess what? The deer are out there eating the native plants, and by and large, they don't eat the invasive plants. So they're taking out the natives and clearing the way for the invasives to take over. So there may be nothing you can do about the deer, but nonetheless, it's something to be aware of. So another thing is one of the themes through here is the inventory the plants and animals in that particular area. Create plant palettes. So, and what the palettes mean is, don't just go plant one plant to do a restoration. What you really need is you need a community of plants. And the best way to find out what plants should be in your communities to plant should be to go analyze what's growing in that area and what are the nearby native plants that thrive in this kind of site, if you will. And then preferably, if you can, get local nearby seeds to use for your planting or nearby plants. Think long term. Make sure you're keeping invasives out of where they aren't, right now. And there's a variety of other topics on here too. One suggestion that was made was to remove the invasive plants for 3 years before you do any really major planting work. So just to make sure they're gone. The other thing that will happen when you do that is you'll also get some sense of what is going to come back on its own. Because the most common restoration method is to do nothing but spot treat the invasives and see what's still left in the seed bank in terms of native plants. And in fact, people are constantly surprised by how robust the native plant seed bank is. So it's still out there in most cases, but you have to kind of try it to find out. So then there are a few other things on here that I'm not going to go into at the moment. So there's some things to talk about there. I'm getting down near the end of the prepared slides. So there's a slide that we put up here for some of our other presentations to talk about things that everyone else can do to help. Certainly you can sign up for our email list and get our newsletters and notifications of other stuff. We also send out alerts. For example, we're about to send one out on Oriental Bittersweet. Say, hey, this is the perfect time to go deal with Oriental Bittersweet. A little late in terms of seed, but as the leaves quiesce off most of the plants, you're going to be able to see all the bittersweet. It's going to stick out like a sore thumb. So that's another thing we do that you'll see if you sign up. So we tell people to understand what you've got and how to deal with them, help your neighbors, report sightings of some of the less common plants in either Maiden or EDD maps. So there's other initiatives that may surface in terms of trying to get the nurseries and the retail establishments to label invasive plants at the point of sale. If you see any of that coming up, yeah, please support it. You can help us nominate more plants for the noxious weeds list. And again, you can do other things in terms of public parks and planting native plants. And again, form a Prism in your area. One of the things we talk about is, as an individual landowner, you can go out and take out all the invasive plants in your property. But then your next problem is, how do you defend your borders from all the plants coming right back in again? And arguably the best way to defend your borders is to have your neighbors do the same thing. So that's part of what gave rise to the Blue Ridge Prism, is the notion of trying to get enough people to do this to make a difference. There's some other things out there that are available and highly recommended. So here's some books. The two on the right are actually published by the U.S. Forest Service. The bad news is they don't print them anymore. The good news is they do still update them, and they're available for free as downloads. So great books. They're two of my absolute favorites. They've done a fabulous job. There's another one here on the left, Plant Invaders of Mid-Atlantic Natural Areas. So also down here is Field Guide to the Piedmont. The two in the middle, also highly recommended. If you're not familiar with Doug Tallamy, he's just written some great books and done some fabulous research on the impacts of non-native plants on our native wildlife. So really important work. So just a couple reminders that we do have that quarterly meeting I mentioned coming up next week on the 21st. If anybody's inclined to turn in a donation, now that we found out this afternoon for sure that we can get a 1-for-1 match on it, we'd be delighted. If you've got another group you need a speaker for, or if you really do want us to help you form another Prism, we'd be delighted to do that. And then I'm going to just be quiet and turn it over for questions. Is anybody still there?
Yes. People are here.
Yes, well, I have a question. It seemed like to start a Prism organization, you need to find somebody with the stamina and ability to really get people interested in the project. Now, I was wondering, do you know any individuals in our area down here that we might approach for a project like this?
Yeah, tricky question. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to do a little research on that. So what I can tell you is that about 2 or 3 years ago, I went down to Abington, so further south, because there was a group of people who were meeting and wanted us to come down and present what does it take to form a Prism, and we did that. And they were all very enthusiastic and very interested. But when it came around to, well, okay, who's going to spend a whole bunch of their own time to go do this? Guess what? Nobody raised their hand. So that's the challenge. We do from time to time encounter people who tell us that, hey, look, if you find other people in my area who are interested in doing this, put me in touch with them. So that does happen. I think there's 1 or 2 such names right now, for example, in the Lexington area. But specifically in your area at the moment, I don't know of any offhand. On the other hand, if you have a group of people who are really interested in doing this, but you need more resource, we can probably help you figure out how to publicize that need and maybe attract some other interested parties.
Okay, good. Well, yeah, I appreciate your offer of help, and I guess we should just publicize the need in our area. Hopefully somebody will volunteer.
Well, so if you go talk to your senior area forester, for example, from the Department of Forestry, if you go talk to your district conservationists, from the NRCS, they are in touch with landowners, and they have some sense sometimes of who are the landowners who are really keenly interested in this subject, and who might be in a position to provide assistance of some kind or another. So when you go out and you start talking to the different partners, who might be party to this, the different organizations, sometimes they will be able to suggest to you, people who are passionate around the subject that they've talked to, but you just haven't met them yet.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, Todd.
I'm just amazed at how much you all have done. I mean, it really is astounding, and thank you for doing it and still doing it. I had a question. Is autumn olive an invasive problem?
Yes, with capital YES.
Oh, really?
Well, Todd, go down to Heritage Park and see
I
what's
don't have to. I have it all over. Dave, I have it growing on my place.
Oh, okay. Well, I have a lot of it too. It's an interesting story. At one time, the state thought that autumn olive would be a good windbreak. And so they made it free to people. And I bought a whole bunch of it, put it around the edges of my yard. And I regretted it very soon because they have berries that the birds like to eat. And it's growing all over my yard. I'm having a terrible time getting rid of it.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but it like everything else, with persistence, it's doable.
English ivy is the one that I got as a gift when I first moved here from the Kip sisters. And it's a gift that keeps going. And I know everybody thinks Glyco Roundup is bad, but it's about the only thing I can use to control it besides pulling it out. And I'm not that crazy about Virginia creeper either.
No.
At least that's a native plant.
Yeah.
And at least, I don't know about you, my experience with Virginia creeper is that unlike a lot of these other vines that we deal with, I don't think I've ever seen it actually kill a full-size tree.
It tries.
It gives it a good effort, but the bittersweets and the kudzus of the world, they don't just try, they do it.
And it does support quite a few native insects, has quite a few species of native caterpillars that use it, etc. Unlike many of the, in fact, most of the non-native, especially invasive ones. So it's an important part of the ecosystem, although I agree it can be a challenge.
Well, and people sometimes want to talk about poison ivy too. Again, same answer. It's a native plant that's a piece of the ecosystem, and lots of things utilize it. But hey, I just don't want it in certain places.
Yeah, it's amazing how many plants I put in here. We moved here in '77, and Bradford pear and butterfly bush and a whole bunch of things like that. I'm not too crazy about redbud either, but that's native too.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I love redbud. I plant redbud from time to time, but we have also in our past as homeowners, planted Bradford pear, periwinkle, English ivy, euonymus.
Periwinkle. Oh.
Yeah, right.
We thought we were doing the right thing.
Yeah, and again, part of the problem is, of course, a lot of these plants are really very attractive. And we've got people up here who at this time of year, they go out and they harvest the Oriental bittersweet and make wreaths that they sell at the local corner store, for holiday decorations. What can I say? We've made our mistakes, but we've learned. In some sense, we're trying to make up for it.
Yeah, but they're innocent and.
So, Rod,
so,
are we talking? speaking of people making mistakes and things, I was wondering, do you all have like a 5 to 10 minute video that's just like a brief overview of the work you're doing? I'm asking this because the Blue Ridge Eco Fair is looking to, they're obviously going online this year, and they're looking to motivate people into making local change that they can do easily in their lives. And so I wonder if you all have a video already, or if, I know it's kind of last minute, their Eco Fair, I believe, launches November 10th. But if you could spread the word through, so it's a group, it's Sustain Floyd is putting that together. And I can connect you if you all are interested, but I think like you all are talking about, there's so many things that people just, you know, don't know, like English Ivy or Bradford Pear or all those things. And it could be a great opportunity to connect with more folks.
Yeah, you know, it's possible we may have what you're looking for, because we were asked to participate in a Department of Forestry, was it Department of Forestry, Virginia Tech, 2-day conference. And it was all done by video, recorded video. And we did a 10-minute segment, I believe, for that conference. So if you don't mind that it's not necessarily, the intro may say the wrong venue,
Yeah.
but if you don't mind that, we may have one that would work.
Okay, I think they're actually offering minor video editing. So they might put their own little blurb on the beginning or something, if that would be all right, but we can connect on that.
Yeah. Can you send me an email
Yes.
and remind me to look for that?
Absolutely. And I also just wanted to say I had connected with Jim Hurley
Oh.
maybe 2 months ago. And David, I am actually very interested in starting something down here. And I think that maybe partnering the native plant campaign with invasive removal and Prism work is a really great pairing. So I know we're just launching the native plant campaign down here, but if we take out this and here's a lot of information about things that you can plant instead, and here is places to buy them, and you know, like the native plant sale was such a great success, and we have leftover plants, and just sharing those plants and sort of working together with, hey, take out your English ivy ground cover, and here's a bunch of goldenrod that can just take over in your yard, you know? And so sort of coupling those together, I think, is something I'm interested in. I don't know if anybody else is interested in that, but
Well, and
I
you
want to throw
mentioned,
that out there.
yeah, you mentioned Jim Hurley. So Jim Hurley is a great example of when we started going around and talking to different organizations about, you know, creating the Blue Ridge Prism. You know, Jim Hurley was, we didn't know Jim Hurley, but yeah, we were maybe 6 months or a year into it, and somebody sent him our way, and he's now one of the officers and a member of the board, and arguably, other than perhaps myself, yeah, nobody does more for the Prism than Jim Hurley does. So yeah, when you go out there and you start, you know, socializing what you want to do, you know, he's a great example of the kind of people you might just run across.
I have a question about use of the invasive plants like the burning bush, cowrie pear. It bothers me that it's on public property, period, but and they pay for it. Is there an initiative statewide to discourage or to say you can't plant those on public property, like university properties, county properties, and that sort of thing, that you don't plant burning bush, cowrie pear, privet? Privet's not planted very much anymore, but cowrie pear and burning bush are planted a lot. And miscanthus, things like that. Is there a
So there are kind of two levels, neither of which does exactly what you want. You know, we are working at the state level on the noxious weeds list, and if we can get autumn olive, for example, onto the noxious weeds list, that means that it will not be sold in the nursery trade, you know, or at retail in the state of Virginia anymore. So just that in itself should slow down, you know, its planting on whether it's public lands or private lands. So, but in terms of actually putting an outright ban on planting on public lands, I suspect that, the only way that's going to happen anytime soon is on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis.
I shouldn't have said ban. Maybe policy in policy that they recommend that you don't do a policy, but not a law or a restriction, but a policy that best practice would be not to plant.
Well, so for example, in where we are, I think it's true that either Albemarle County and or the city of Charlottesville, have recommended planting lists, for use within their geographies. But I don't think they have the power of law to stop a landscaper from planting those things. But they do have the power of law in effect for county or city activities. So if the county is doing planting, they have a planting list to plant from, and I think the city does too. But I will tell you that those lists are not pristine in terms of just using native plants, but they are slowly improving. Just like we're getting VDOT to take Sericea lespedeza off of their statewide planting list. If you're an activist and you go work with the relevant jurisdictions, you can make a difference.
Yeah, I did that in Christiansburg, but I have to renew it because I went there and I was saying I was concerned about what they were planting, and they said, well, the engineer said, well, give me a list. So they have sort of used that, but then there are people that give donate anyway. So that does sort of work. More so than a policy than or suggestions for them.
Well, and another thing you can do is the reverse, which is, the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation in their Natural Heritage Division publishes a list of 90 invasive plants. And that list is readily available through their website. And actually, I think it's available through our website as well. You can take that list and hand it to anybody and say, please make sure that you're not planting any of these.
So what was that organization again?
So this is the DCR, the Department of Conservation and Recreation.
Yeah.
So that's one.
Although I have to say, some of those that they don't have some of the plants that I'm concerned about on that list, because we looked at it just recently, and I forget now which ones. And another one I'm digging out of my neighbor's yard that I planted in my yard that I thought hadn't gone out of my yard, but now it's where a dry creek is and water goes down into Christiansburg Depot Park. It's Aromatallicum. Now that's on the Virginia Native Plant Society list, but that one should not be sold. It's really bad. I had it in my yard and I was so sorry I had planted it.
Yeah, it's Arum Italica. I've seen conversations with the Mid-Atlantic Invasive Plant Council. I don't know if any of you are on their blog, but there's been conversations on there, I know, about Arum Italica. I'm not personally familiar with it, and I'm not sure whether that means I don't have any or I just don't know what to look for yet.
It's a plant, an ornamental plant that's planted. It's still sold, and it's evergreen in the winter. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful plant. It has red seed pods, and then it seeds around like crazy. I don't know what carries it. I don't know what carries it. I don't know how it gets where it goes, but it'll just pop up everywhere, and it has little corms, and
in its native habitat, it is carried by ants the way so many of our natives are. But from what I've read, I'm not sure anybody's been able to establish whether any of our species of ants do carry it, but it sure does spread. And once anyone in the neighborhood has it, everybody has it.
Wow.
And if it goes downstreams, and I have it out here in my 5-gallon buckets. I left water in them because I felt bad about putting the trash. I don't know what happens in the trash anymore, whether it would go to the landfill and then start growing there. It's still living. It's been in there for weeks, and it's still just happy as a lark in the water. That's scary.
What is the species y'all are talking about?
Arum Italica Italian arum.
Oh,
It-
Lords,
it is
Lords and Ladies is
it
a
is
common name. Very
Uh,
common now around Blacksburg. I've seen it. I've told people don't plant it, and they're like, "Oh, I like it," and I want it to spread. And I was like, "Oh,
Yeah, it's all over our street, Cohee, where we used to live, including all in the yard, my old house yard.
So I live one street over on Sunset, and we have it in the Boulevard median. My kids love those berries.
Yeah, it's a neat plant, but you can't get rid of it, and it really does start taking over.
Aromatica. I've seen other people talk about it. So yeah, and to your point, Beth, the DCR list of 90 invasive plants, they put that list together with good science. Yeah, back in 2014, I believe, is when it was published. So it's 6 years out of date at this point. And there have been other things that have shown up or become more visible in the meantime. But nonetheless, it's still arguably the best place to start if you're going to take a list to a jurisdiction and say, please don't plant any of these.
I put that list in the chat as well as a link to the Mid-Atlantic Invasive Species Council. If anyone wants to check that out.
Yeah, good.
I had one more question. Rod, I was wondering, I think you answered it, but that we could use your resources and put them on our native plant website or native plant campaign. Is that all right? Or what's sort of the understanding there about sharing knowledge and media that's already been organized and all that stuff?
So the answer is have at it. So yeah, I mean, if people have a need or a use for them, go ahead and use them.
Yeah, I know we have Master Naturalists here and other, people in this group are in other groups as well. So it'd be great to sort of share those in the New River Valley.
Yeah, no problem at all. What else can I help anybody with?
I just like to say thank you for doing this because that's what I do all the time now is remove invasives, and planting natives is a real joy at some point, but it's really important what you're doing it's really hard to get people to understand this is if you drive between Blacksburg and Christiansburg now and look at all the Cowrie pears, it's not, and that used to be dogwoods, redbuds, and red cedar that came up succession. And
right.
It's really bad. Yeah.
Well, there's two things that I'm looking for help with, and I'm talking to some highly placed people in Richmond about this, as well as other organizations. There are two studies that I would like to figure out how to get done. One is the economic impact study that says, how much money is being spent in the state of Virginia each year to deal with invasive plants, whether it's agriculture, whether it's homeowners, whether it's people in orchards, it's the people running public parks, the national parks. The amount of money that's being spent in the state of Virginia to deal with invasive plants has got to be enormous, but nobody has a clue as to how much it really is. And if we actually had that documented, we could take that to Richmond and talk to a variety of people and say, look, whatever the number is, I'm going to make up a number. People are spending $100 million a year in the state of Virginia on this problem. For you as the government to spend $1 million to head some of this off, makes all the sense in the world. So that's study number one. Study number two is to take the northern Blue Ridge Mountains or some iconic forest, if you will, and ask the question of Virginia Tech or UVA to say, I want you to do a projection. What is this territory going to look like in 100 years from now if we don't do anything more than we're doing today? And the fear, of course, is that large swaths of our beautiful forests are going to turn into green mounds. And based on our own experience here, and Maggie and I are neighbors of the Shenandoah National Park, and we've had huge issues with Bittersweet, and we've watched Bittersweet. We started the Prism because we had 20 acres of Bittersweet up against the national park that we couldn't walk into. I mean, it was effectively, off limits. So, we went to work on it. And the fear is that in 100 years, you're going to see that phenomenon all over the place. And it's not just Bittersweet, of course. It's kudzu, it's mile a minute, it's five-leaf akevia, etc. Porcelainberry. And that's just the vines. That doesn't count all the other invasive plants and the damage that they're doing. So I would love to have some academicians actually do a real serious science-based projection of where is this going and how bad is it going to be, so that, again, we can paint the picture to policymakers that says, look, if you don't do anything, this is what you're handing down to the next generation. So the problem, of course, is either one of these either one of these studies probably is going to cost somewhere between $200,000 to $500,000 to get it done. But I think it's money well spent given the impacts that the state is actually incurring. So
No, that's good.
those are two of my hot buttons, that I'm going to be working on in the next year, is to see if I can get one or both of those funded somehow.
Good long term.
So anybody's got any suggestions on how to do that, let me know. What else? Anything else?
Yeah. Good ideas.
Right.
Good ideas and good plans.
So hey, it's all, as again, to encourage anybody who's interested to go after this, rarely, if ever, have we ever encountered anybody who's criticized anything we've done, and virtually everybody has voiced enthusiastic support. So yeah, it's very rewarding. I mean, this is one of those things where if Maggie and I didn't find a lot of other people out there interested in helping to make this happen, we'd say the heck with it, and we'd just go back and work on our own property. But it's been a great enough enthusiastic response out there from the landowner community as well as the agencies that it just keeps you going and makes you want to keep doing it. So I recommend it if you've got the energy and the passion around it.
You will have the energy and passion if you see how nasty the invasives can be.
That's right.
That makes you really very aware.
Right. So, and if there's any, Brenda and Nicole, if there's any other follow-ups we can ever do anywhere down the road, just let us know. And again, if anybody really wants to get into this, up to your eyeballs, attend one of our workshops, because that's a half-day session. It's 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours of classroom, talking about how to identify and how to treat all the different kinds of invasive plants, all the different methods.
Yeah, I attended one of your summer ones. I know Dave Jenkins has attended one of them too. So they are very informative in that. So
very educational.
Well, and if you ever decided you wanted to sponsor, and could attract an audience of your own, if you want us to come give it for that audience, we can do that too.
Okay, appreciate that. I think the main thing right now is either maybe Wong Park or possibly Nicole's suggestion with the plant Virginia natives in Southwest Virginia, going in with that somehow or other. That seems the two best initial ones, to get started with possibly, but we'll just have to see in that then.
Yeah, well, good.
Yeah, we very much appreciate your talk in that, and it's very informative, so.
Well, and we thank you for your interest and for the invitation, and we hope we have the opportunity to work with some or all of you going forward at some point. So you let us know. We're here to help.
Can I just ask one
Thanks.
real quick?
Thanks a lot.
Oh, I was gonna ask one question. I want to ask about Wong Park. Have you all worked with the town at all to remove invasives, or have they been receptive to that, or has that conversation started? I just wondered if Rod had any suggestions about if we've already adopted a place.
That would be asking David Darnell, because he's the Blacksburg, what do you call him, supervisor, the regulations for the town in that.
Okay.
So he's got his office there in the house right there on the property of Wong Park. So he would be the one to ask about that. I know Dave Jenkins is interested in Wong Park, and I believe David Darnell is too. So they would be the ones to ask if anything has been done yet. We're still working on the sign for Wong Park and that, which we're going to need to get some more help with and that. But I'll bring that up with the board and that in another while on that, anyways. But Wong Park is one of the parks that we're particularly interested in, but I just don't know how far along anything else has been done about the invasives and that. I know it's been talked about, but.
So a couple of suggestions. You know,
Mhm.
one is if there's going to be activities taking place there to remove invasives, take
Mhm.
lots of pictures.
Mm.
You're going to want to be able to show the before and after,
Okay.
and it might actually become an educational kiosk by the time you're done.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, pictures will be important. The
Okay.
other thing is in terms of planning to figure out what do you do. And again, I don't know where you're at in this process at all, but the first thing we tell people to do is understand what's there. So, you know, do an inventory, if not a map, that says, okay, what kind of, if you're talking about invasive plants, well, what are all the invasive plants that are there? How much of them, with what density, and where are they?
Mhm.
You know, Brenda and David, if either of you attended one of the workshops I gave, I actually had in there an example of a map of
Yeah, I
a
think we
property
did.
where we actually
Mhm.
mapped an invasive plant.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that for 13 different plants across that entire property. So the
Mhm.
first thing is to understand what you have
Mhm.
and how much of it and how it's distributed. So, you know, create your little handwritten maps or however you do it, so that you can sit down there and say, hey, look, hey, we've got these 12 or 15 or 30 different, you know, kinds of plants to deal with. You know, here's how they're distributed. What does this mean in terms of strategy? You know, which plants do we go after first and why? Do we have areas that are relatively pristine that we want to keep relatively clear? You know, if you understand what you have and how it's distributed, you can then have a really interesting conversation around what's important and what's the right strategy, what's the right priority, etc. So start with making sure you really understand what's there. And how it's distributed and how much.
But I
you
know
have.
David Darnell was interested because it's only a 9 acres, so it's a small enough area that's delineated and everything. And I think they've done some mapping, but I don't know if they've done it currently or not. So, so yes.
Yeah.
Anybody have any other suggestions or anything, or?
Thank you.
And currently, we're doing Depot Park on Thursdays, and also anytime anybody wants to come to Depot Park on their own, and Stadium Woods, and every little bit helps.
Beth, could you talk all about how Stadium Woods has changed since you started removing invasives there?
Well, first off, people, I was not involved, right, but they removed the vines from the trees. That was the major thing, the bittersweet, and so they wouldn't. So my main goal is to keep things from going to seed first, and then we were moving things. We have large groups of students, but when that's happened, and we just drop things. We just pull them and drop, pull and drop, pull and drop. We don't bag anything. We just pull and drop or dig up and drop. And it's been amazing what's come back. I found this on one side of the woods we've been working on recently. I found 3. I found one today. If I can cut leaf grape fern. 3 of them in the woods. And I didn't know they were in there before. Last year, Fred found 2 putty roots. We didn't know those were in the woods. But when we do remove things, then cutleaf toothwort comes back. We found some choke cherry, but that's already in there. It's above the canopy. Well, there's all kinds of things that come back. I've noticed a whole lot more star chickweed where we're working. It has a sterile frond that I learned about from Tom Weebold because I didn't know what it was, but there's a sterile frond in the fall. So there's a lot of that in there where we're working on this one bank. But as we remove things, it is amazing what's come back in, and it's not like weeds are coming back in there or anything that's non-native plants. It's native plants coming back in there if we keep those invasives out.
Hey, Beth, do you have before and after pictures of some of the areas or some of the new plants that have come in?
Start working. I don't want to take pictures, but if somebody, I think there have been pictures taken, and people told me that we probably should take pictures before and after. But like the difference is, if you walk down the gravel path now, on the left-hand side up all the bank, you can see all the way through those woods. You can walk through those woods from one side all the way to the police station now you could walk through those woods. Before you couldn't walk through them. So I just start working. I don't know. Don't take pictures. If somebody wants to come and take pictures of before and after. I think Rodney might have taken some. But, and I think there have been ones taken when people are working in the woods. I've taken some when we work in the woods, but mainly we just put our heads down and our butts up and we just start working.
I know. I was just thinking it would be helpful to have some pictures of some of the things that are coming out to kind of advertise. And we're
coming up. You mean the things that are blooming?
Well, no, I mean just new plants that have come back and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I have taken pictures of those. I'm not a very good photographer. I don't have a good camera. My phone's better now, but I have taken pictures of. I try to photograph everything I see. I didn't do anything this year, but anyway, yes, I have done that.
Okay, I was just curious. I think that would help. And we're having an expanded cleanup this Sunday from 3 to 5. We're advertising it through Sustainable Blacksburg and trying to get more community members out. So
you wear a mask, but also if you're way far away from people, it's easy to do. There's plenty of English ivy in that wood still. Sometimes I just can't breathe with one, so I take it off. But the students have to wear them. But we can spread out. It's really easy to spread out in the woods.
So, one thing, Beth, that you triggered in my mind is, I'm not sure what you're really doing with the bittersweet, but one of the things we tell people in our workshops is, if you're cutting vines, particularly larger ones, I tell people never ever pull them out of the trees.
Oh, that's true. No, we don't. We just cut them, and then when we just cut them, and then sometimes we have removed them after they decayed a whole lot because there's a lot of kids in there all the time, dads and everybody. And one time John Ford yanked it was like a folded, like 7 or 8 different shoots going up together. And I was standing there under the tree and he yanked on it. It just folded up, and Jeff Kerr was watching it too. I stood still, but it was folding up in front of me 6 feet at a time, that dry stuff. But we do pull the dry stuff out once it's dry. Yeah, but we don't normally pull things out. No, we don't pull that.
I mean, the problem is, even if it's a dead vine, you never know when it's going to shake a branch loose up there.
Yeah.
And you can literally get killed.
Right. In Stadium Woods, there's lots of dead branches. It's dangerous in there, high winds and all. So we don't work with that.
Yeah, we just leave the vines hanging in the trees and just let Mother Nature bring them down later.
Because they land.
Yeah, it's a very, very dangerous proposition. And of course, when you're cutting vines, what we tell people in our workshop is that typically you want to cut them off near the ground, and then immediately, you can't wait very long. You paint the cut face with concentrated herbicide, and that way you will kill the root system and it will not sprout.
Woods, we're not allowed to use herbicide, so we pull and cut.
Yeah, well, it's very difficult to kill a sizable bittersweet without herbicide.
We have done it. My husband's pulled up great big ones. Yes, we've done it. We've done it with just pulling up. We've done it without any herbicide. Yep.
Hey, good for you.
That's the way to do it.
That's impressive.
Uh,
Good time.
Thank you very much for the warning about pulling down the vines.
No kidding.
I've been doing that for years.
That's very scary.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, just leave them hang. I mean, they'll be down in a few years, and that's fine. You know,
They're dead. They're basically dead.
you know, a lot of people have gotten really hurt, you know, doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll have to include that tip in our invasive removal guide.
Yeah. Really important.
Okay, I guess if nobody has any other questions, they can always contact Rod afterwards, so, okay. And we're gonna be putting this up as a YouTube video. Nicole will let me know what the link is and that to get to it that she set up and that. So
Yep,
I'm
it's
trying
in
to
the chat too if anybody wants it now.
Oh, okay.
You can just subscribe to it. So, and Deborah did a really awesome video last meeting that I highly recommend watching. It was really great.
Okay, then, well, thank you everybody for attending this. Very informative and everything then. And our next speaker in November will be on restoration of riparian land along the creeks and that. So
Cool.
hope to see you then. So thanks everybody for participating anyways.
Thanks for having a great meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Good luck.
Very well
Mhm.
Look
done.
forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, it was good information. Excellent.